G'day, Michael here. This video is about my little workshop in a shoebox. As you can see, we're out in my garden, and here we have it. My machine shop is in that box. Well, it's not exactly a shoebox, but it's a shipping container. I guess I've had this thing for about 15, 16 years. And it's showing its age. I mean, it was an old shipping container when I got it. But there's some pluses and some minuses, and there's some cockatoos. There's some pluses and some minuses about shipping containers. No need to point those out. First I'll open it up. There are a couple of problems I face with this shipping container. My main business is, of course, cabinet making. And so this is treated very much as a secondary thing, not as important to me directly. But doing from time to time various things with machines and knick-knacks and bits and bobs that actually need for the joinery, or if there's something needs repair or modification, I need this machine shop just for the oddball things that I do, not for my main line. But as a result, this container gets used as a storage shed as well, because I'm desperately short on space. So things like this mixer and other bits and bobs have to be taken out before I can move in and use it. That's one disadvantage I've got here. Basically, I've got too much stuff for the space that I have, but that's life. I guess we all have that problem, or many of us do. All right, so one of the first things that I found out the hard way, was that the shipping containers are very good at, well, they're not insulated, so they collect condensation. So as a result, I don't know whether you can see that, but there is actually a lot of mould and mildew, as well as rust, of course, but mould and mildew, all the black stuff there, is a result of me, because I have a grinder in here, in the far distance there behind all the other stuff, I would keep a bucket of cold, just of water, to cool anything I'm grinding. And what would happen is I'd always find the bucket was empty every time I came in here. But what had actually happened is, with the temperature changes through day and night, the bucket would empty and deposit as condensation on the walls and ceiling and all my objects. So rust was a big problem, but it took me a little while to twig what was going on, unfortunately. So I've actually got a lot of rust damage to a lot of the bits and pieces I have in here, which was quite disappointing. I did buy this lathe new. Admittedly, it's already that sort of 15, 16 years old, but it wouldn't have to be this rusty. And it has suffered quite a bit of rust, as you can see there. It did actually come with a little rust on it. It wasn't perfect, but certainly not what it is now. Basically, anything that was well oiled is still pretty much pristine, but anything that's been exposed in the way of, steel that is prone to rusting did rust in the time that was in this container. So condensation is an issue with the containers. What was another issue? Oh yes, the ceilings are, as you can see, there's a bit of a domed surface to the ceiling, and the roof. Basically, it's a one sheet metal. But not being a new container, it has a few dents and so forth. So what I did find is it's actually wise to have them tilted slightly. So this one's leaning off to the left. You probably can't perceive any of that slope you may have seen on the video outside. But the whole structure is actually, if I held the camera, what I think is level would be about there. So as a result, all my surfaces are in fact at that slight angle. I guess it's probably 2 degrees or 2 or 3 degrees. But the intention of that is to actually generate a slope so that water isn't so prone to sitting on the container. It doesn't really solve the problem, but it has helped a little, particularly other containers that I have. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 shipping containers, and I did find that was a beneficial thing for most of them, having a bit of a slope. All right, the other thing I don't like is I've got this down on the ground outside, and I've elevated them by big lumps of timber underneath. I mean, ideal would be probably a concrete slab and something to, again, elevate it from that concrete slab so as to provide ventilation to get rid of moisture. You can see there's quite a bit of corrosion on the container. The seals are certainly not to custom standard anymore. I mean, that's why you get these old containers at a reduced price. Now, I've said all the bad things about the container that I can think of right now, but the plus side is, even these fairly poor seals are very good at keeping out vermin. Now, I do have some ants that seem to find their way in here. Don't know whether we can get some focus on them. Where are we? Yeah, you can see some ants there. So ants have managed to find their way in here. But spiders, obviously snakes and mice, have been well and truly kept out of here. So it's been quite vermin proof, even though it's not quite, it's not 100%, but it's quite good. If I would have used a small garden shed type structure, I would have had probably much more in the way of vermin than what I have now. So to that end, the shipping container has been quite successful. This one has a timber floor. Many of them have a steel floor or a plywood floor. I much prefer this timber floor. It's a very good floor to actually have underfoot. And it's quite a stable floor for things like the lathe and so forth. So that's been quite a positive thing about the shipping container. Now in this container, I'm leaving it packed with all the junk in here that I normally have to move out before I do anything. Cement mixer. A project I'm working on, well actually quite a few projects I'm working on. And this baby mill, it's basically, when I say baby, this is my hand relative to it, so it's not that small. I guess it's probably about not quite 4 feet tall. It's a 3 kilowatt motor, so what's that about? Around about 4 horsepower motor. I do have a power feed on this one axis, and I've got this this little desktop mill. So I think a guy at the Australian National University might have made this years ago. He's probably no longer with us. It's kind of sort of a mill and drill combination. It's a very light duty machine, but it's great for fine work. I'd say it'd be a very good model maker's tool. I use it a lot because it's so light to use, and most of my work doesn't have to be like an instrument maker would do. So it's not, not super precise for any heavier cuts, but certainly hole drilling. It's far better than the average drill press for accuracy. Yeah. Right, and over here, of course, I've got bench grinder. In amongst all these other bits and bobs, I've got like a buffing wheel. I've just physically bolted everything to the bench top. Even this old, I believe this was made probably in somewhere between the 1930s and the 1950s. I don't see a date on it. But there's the label. It's made in Melbourne. I believe it's based on an old English design. It's got a power feed unit, so it's quite a useful lathe. One thing I do like about it is it does have the open pulley arrangement, which probably would have been, it could well have been even steam driven at one stage. But I've got a bit of a kludged electric motor. I didn't create this kludge, but I'm using it as it was given to me or sold to me. The parts are not very accurate. The pulleys have got a lot of wobble in them. I don't know whether that shows up. Be holding it and hold it more steady. The pulleys wobble around quite a bit. But you can see this is designed for a flat belt drive. I'm using a belt called Red Thane. Does that label show up? Red Thane. It's a polyurethane tube that you put a joiner in, and you can make, I think it's good for about 2 kilowatts, that belt. Alright, now the transmission on this unit is basically a stack of pulleys. You can dismantle the transmission and make it whatever combination you like. It's kind of nifty. I'm by no means a master machinist as far as the metalwork lathe, but this has let me do some pretty fantastic tricks. Yeah, it's a great old lathe. I love it. It's a good tool to use. All right, moving right along. And of course the larger lathe that I showed earlier. Well, I guess that's about it. So I guess that's it. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, ask a question, leave a comment. Bye for now.